Hi everyone, I'm back with another resource to share with you. Today's book is Arrivals, Departures and the Adventures in Between by Chris O'Shaughnessy. Now, as always, I'm going to start with a little story for you, or a couple stories. I first became aware of Chris because his book came out 2 years before mine and published by my same publisher. Summertime Publishing has actually done a lot of the top TCK works out there, so it's a great place to start if you're looking for literature. And when we were getting around to doing the pre-publication reviews for my book, Chris was one of the people that my publisher suggested we send a copy to, an advance copy to, for him to write a review for it. And it turned out to be one of the ones I found the most touching, actually. Here's what he wrote about my book, Misunderstood. He wrote, "Misunderstood left me feeling refreshingly understood. Compassionate and discerning, its blend of gathered narrative and insight left me with a sense of belonging as well as an appreciation for the many varieties of experience similar to mine. This is the guidebook I want to give people to explain my cultural upbringing." In just a couple of sentences, he went straight to the heart about what my book is supposed to be, which I just felt like, wow, I haven't met you, haven't had a conversation, and I feel like we click. He was someone I felt like I knew before we'd ever actually met, because, you know, there's this network online of people who do the TCK thing. We're all spread out. There's not that many of us. You get to know the other literature. And so the first time we met, it took us a second to be like, we've never actually met, have we? And it was the most random TCK kind of a first meeting. I don't remember which one of us noticed first. He was in Korea visiting friends or something, and I was about to go there to speak at a school. And so I guess I had posted I was going to Korea, and he had posted he was in Korea, and one of us saw the other one's post and wrote and said, hey, are we going to overlap, basically? And we worked out that he was checking in for his flight about the same time that I would be leaving the airport, having arrived with my flight. So what did we do? Of course, he came and met me at the arrivals and we chatted for a few minutes, and then he went off to departures to check in for his flight. And that was our first in-person meeting, which was fabulous, and I love it. It's my favorite. And then we hung out a bunch at the Families in Global Transition Conference last year. So someone I really haven't spent that much time with and yet feel like is a friend. And I love that. And I think that's something that comes a lot in this expat world, is that, you know, sometimes you just click with people through enough shared experience and enough similar personality, and you don't have to spend a lot of time together, which I just love. Anyway, but that's not why I'm sharing about Chris's book. I'm sharing about Chris's book because it's one of the resources I recommend super often. People often ask me, can I give my book, the parent asks me, can I give your book, Misunderstood, can I give this book to my kid to read? Would that be appropriate for them to read? And I'm always a little bit cautious there. It wasn't designed for high schoolers or for middle schoolers to read. It was designed primarily for parents and counsellors and other care workers or extended family who want to understand the student's experience. But also for the young adult TCKs to go, oh, okay, I'm not the only one. Other people have been through what I've been through. I make sense of my context. So I feel like for younger TCKs, they're probably not at the place to really recognise that yet, to feel like, oh, yeah, this is the common stuff. If they're in high school and they've already moved back to their passport country, then yep, there'd be a lot they'd resonate with. If they're mature enough to be sort of self-reflective, and if they're sort of high school, they might appreciate it. I think the best use for it with the younger kids is reading it along with parents. Like if you both read it, it gives you common vocabulary. But generally I wouldn't recommend it until a bit later, until they've repatriated or they're on their own or they're young adult. But Chris's book, that is the one that I unreservedly recommend for the younger TCKs, for the high schoolers, even for middle schoolers, for college students. Like, this is the book to give them. This is the book that's written to them, for them. Chris is an amazing storyteller, right? Every chapter he's telling stories from his experiences in different countries and different places, and quite often making fun of himself in the process. And it's fun to read, and there's this real sense of we're in this together, we can laugh at each other, we've all got different kinds of experiences, and in each chapter he's tapping into different aspects of the experience. I wanted to share one of the stories with you. It's one that I personally related to quite well. So he was an American military kid who grew up you know, largely in the UK, and he had moved to the US at the age of 7, and this is what happened to him on the first day of school. I'm already smiling because I love this story. Just when I didn't think it could get any stranger, the whole class in unison began to recite what I would later learn was the Pledge of Allegiance. Not wanting to look out of place, I hastily adopted the same stance as everyone else. Unfortunately, I happened to be left-handed, and so instinctively covered my heart with my left hand, which I later found out is considered unacceptable, and listened to the voices reciting patriotic poetry all around me. The only patriotic thing I knew was God Save the Queen. And so, not wanting to be the only one standing in silence, I began to recite the UK's national anthem. Sadly, the Pledge of Allegiance is not a terribly long work, and as I had started late, I was not able to finish my one-man homage to the Queen before the rest of the students finished their patriotic recital. In the silence that followed their morning routine, one small voice could be heard uttering the final lines to God Save the Queen in a thick British accent. Send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us, God save the Queen. All eyes fixed on me. Gasps took in so much air that the oxygen in the room may have become scarce, but thin air was not enough to save me from the impending wrath of Mrs. Bower. What followed was a stern lecture about the importance of patriotism and severe warnings that antics of the magnitude I had just displayed would not be tolerated. She continued at high decibels in front of an audience of stunned and somewhat bemused students. For my part, I could not figure out what I had done wrong, but I was sure that whatever unknown infraction I had committed, I could well be executed for trying it again. That is just one of a lot of hilarious anecdotes. And I, you know, because I went and was in an American public school as an Australian student, so I relate to a bit of that, not really fitting in with the school culture and not understanding the way things are done there. I actually remember my youngest sister was in grade sort of 5 for most of the time, in her grade 4, 5, 6 when we were there, and every day they would say the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of school, and her teacher told her it was okay if she didn't say it because, you know, he knew that she wasn't the US, but she felt too weird to be the only one who didn't, so she said it anyway. Whereas I, in my high school assemblies, because we didn't do it every day, I would choose to, usually I would stand, but I wouldn't put my hand over my heart, and I wouldn't say it because it wasn't my country, which a lot of people didn't take well. So I related to that story, and there's lots of other stories to relate to. But it's not just funny stories. Chris is a really great way of tapping into some of the emotional issues at the heart of TCK life and of working out how to live a healthy life, emotionally, psychologically healthy life, things to consider and to think about and ways to push it. He really challenges in this gentle, quiet, and yet firm way for TCKs to self-examine and to look at some of these different areas in a way that I think is really helpful. So I wanted to read a little passage of something more along those lines as well. This is from a section called Self-Reliance. Yeah, I'm just going to launch in. He says, one side effect that having to repeatedly adapt to new places can cause in TCKs is a tendency toward self-reliance. As TCKs, we are more prone to be self-reliant because there is usually not much else in our lives that can maintain the same degree of consistency as ourselves. In light of this, it's important to be able to balance self-reliance with some healthy interdependence. It seems, in my experience at least, that we human beings sometimes really like easily categorized black and white extremes. It may be simpler that way, but it is not necessarily accurate. Just because one person has let you down doesn't mean everyone will. Just because some people have faded from your life doesn't mean everyone will. There have been times when the feelings of isolation that come with being the new person and the sting of being alone have pushed me to believe I must shield myself from the inevitable disappointment that comes from trusting other people. I convinced myself I am destined to plow through life strong, noble, and alone. But finding balance through depending on people and not being dependable yourself, and being dependable yourself is immensely valuable. Growing up in transience with an ability to adapt and deal with change may take some extra effort, but it adds to the myriad of reasons that well-adjusted TCKs are a very powerful ingredient in making the world a better place. Change is happening all the time. We can't stop it, so we may as well harness it to accomplish some good for us and for the world around us. This is a really great book. It's full of stories and challenges, and it is worth putting in the hands of any TCK you know. I would say grade, I don't know, 6, 7 and above can benefit from this book, all the way through to mid-20s. There's something in there for each age gap. And it's speaking to them, not speaking down to them, not speaking about them, not academic, let's talk about this group, but speaking directly to them. And that's fantastic, and there's not much out there that does that. So yep, one of my top recommendations, Arrivals, Departures, and the Adventures in Between by Chris O'Shaughnessy. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.